My husband took his mistress to our beach house, unaware that cameras had been installed. The affair, exposed on video, destroyed 15 years of marriage. Between glasses of wine and dips in the hot tub she had decorated, he shared intimate memories, as if they meant nothing. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and rebirth that will shake you to your core. Prepare to discover how she transformed pain into power. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment. What would you do in her place? 15 years. That's how long I believed I knew the man with whom I shared my bed, my dreams, and my name. 15 years believing that what we built together was as solid as the stones I personally chose for the facade of our beach house in the Hamptons. 15 years wasted on someone who managed to maintain two parallel lives as easily as he chose his ties each morning. Allow me to begin with what should have been the happy ending of our story. We were about to celebrate our crystal anniversary. For months, I planned a celebration worthy of what I thought was a successful marriage. I ordered personalized crystal glasses from the Czech Republic, arranged for renovations at the beach house we love so much, and booked the restaurant where we first met to relive our first date. How pathetic I was. My name is Helen. I'm 42, and I'm an architect. Charles is 45 and owns an import-export company that has grown considerably in recent years. Successful entrepreneur, as he loves to present himself on his elegantly printed business cards. If only I had known his greatest enterprise would be building a double life behind my back. The signs were there, of course. The business meetings. That always coincided with our weekends at the beach house. The phone that never left his pocket, always on silent mode. The sudden interest in the gym and new clothes. The wardrobe overhaul at 45, including colorful underwear I'd never seen. The executive assistant hired 10 months ago, Ashley, 28 years old, with a degree in international relations and a smile too perfect to be merely professional. She's extremely competent, Helen, he'd say, while I swallowed my suspicions. She has international contacts that are boosting our business. I need her. Yes. Apparently he needed her in various ways that went far beyond any employment contract. My mother always said a woman's intuition is never wrong. Poor Mom. She passed away believing I had found the Prince Charming she never had. Maybe it was better that way. She didn't have to witness the castle crumbling. It was during the renovation of the beach house that I decided to do something I never thought I would. I installed discrete cameras in several rooms. At the time, I justified it to the contractor by mentioning the recent wave of burglaries in the area. A half-truth. Deep down, I was tired of imagining ghosts and wanted to prove to myself that I was wrong, that Charles was the man I always believed him to be. How painful it is when our worst suspicions are confirmed. The first time I accessed the recordings, I expected to find only the silence of an empty house, or at most, the caretaker, doing his weekly maintenance. What I saw was Charles opening the front door with unnerving ease. Behind him, Ashley carried a small weekend bag and a designer handbag I recognized immediately. It was the same one he had given me last Christmas. "Welcome to our refuge," he said to her. Our refuge. The words hit me like a slap. That space I had designed with so much love, where we spent so many family summers, where I thought we would create memories for our old age, was now our refuge, his and hers. I watched, paralyzed as they toured the house. Charles showed off each room like a proud tour guide. Helen picked out this dining table on a trip to Milan. It's solid wood. The way he pronounced my name, casual, distant, as if I were just an acquaintance, the decorator hired to beautify the space. They opened a bottle of my favorite wine, the one we saved for special occasions. They sat on the deck overlooking the ocean, in those chairs I specifically chose for comfort and the privileged view of the sunset. They toasted to new beginnings, as if my end had already been decreed without my knowledge. For 6 hours straight, I watched everything. Every kiss, every touch, every laugh shared at my expense. They used our bed, the mattress I meticulously chose because of Charles's back problems, the Egyptian cotton sheets I bought on our last trip, my pillow. At one point, Charles picked up our wedding portrait from the bedside table and showed it to her. It was a beautiful day, he commented indifferently, like someone talking about any corporate event. But nothing compared to what we'll have. And then, with frightening naturalness, he put our photo in the drawer, like someone filing away an irrelevant document. I didn't cry that day. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. A strange calm came over me, as if I were watching a movie about someone else. I observed every minute with clinical attention, absorbing details, calculating times, noticing behavioral patterns. My architectural training always taught me to have a keen eye for detail. That skill, ironically, now served to map out the destruction of my married life. In the following days, I didn't confront Charles. Something inside me, perhaps wounded pride or mere survival instinct, decided I needed to understand the full extent of the betrayal before taking any action. I wouldn't be just another hysterical wife throwing accusations. I would be methodical, patient, calculating if necessary. I created a spreadsheet. Yes, a spreadsheet. As if managing another renovation project. I cataloged dates, times, conversations captured by the cameras. I noted every lie he told me to justify his absences. Every meeting with suppliers that was actually a rendezvous with her. Every problem at the company that needed urgent weekend attention. With a coldness surprising even to myself, I began investigating other aspects. I managed to access the statements for the corporate credit card he always kept strictly confidential, claiming financial organization. The expenses told another story. Exorbitant restaurant bills on nights he claimed to be at business conventions. Reservations at luxury hotels when he was supposedly attending meetings with company-paid accommodation. Jewelry store purchases on random dates that didn't coincide with our anniversaries or holidays. For someone who prided himself on being an impeccable financial manager, Charles left a pathetic trail of evidence. Maybe deep down he wanted to be discovered. Or more likely, he was so sure of my gullibility that he didn't even bother being discreet. A month after the initial discovery, I made an excuse to visit the beach house alone. I told Charles I needed to check some renovation details that hadn't turned out as planned. He readily agreed, perhaps even relieved to have a free weekend for his urgent business. At the house, besides checking the new recordings, I conducted a thorough inspection. Under the master bedroom bed, I found an earring that wasn't mine. An expensive designer piece, certainly not belonging to the cleaning lady. I carefully placed it in an envelope, labeled with the exact date and location where it was found. More evidence for my growing collection. Again, I surprised myself with my own calmness. What I expected was an explosion of jealousy, uncontrollable tears, the urge to destroy objects. Instead, I felt only a growing emptiness, a dull ache that seemed numbed by the need to act with precision. The Charles I knew had died for me the moment I saw him entering our home with another woman. What remained now was just dealing with his ghost, with the necessary coldness to ensure I wouldn't emerge even more hurt from the situation. It was during that lonely weekend, listening to the sound of the waves from the deck that once brought me peace, that I realized. Part of me still desperately hoped for an explanation other than betrayal. Some elaborate misunderstanding, a cruel practical joke. Anything except the simple, painful truth that the man I loved for 15 years had simply found something he considered better. Younger, more exciting, less familiar. I called my best friend, Patricia. A friendship spanning 2 decades, my maid of honor, my confidant in all important moments. We arranged lunch at that waterfront restaurant we'd frequented together since college. The place where we cried over youthful heartbreaks, celebrated professional achievements, toasted my engagement. Between the main course and dessert, as I contemplated whether to share my discovery with her, Patricia let slip something that made my blood run cold. Have you seen much of Ashley, Charles's assistant? He mentioned she's doing really well at the company. The casualness with which she mentioned the name, the way she avoided my gaze when asking the question. Everything indicated she knew. Maybe not all the sordid details, but enough. Why do you ask? I kept my voice controlled while my heart raced. Oh, nothing. It's just that Charles always talks about her so enthusiastically. I thought maybe you two had gotten closer too. It was at that moment, watching my friend of 2 decades carefully choose her words, that I realized. The betrayal was twofold. Patricia knew, probably for months, and chose to protect Charles's secret instead of alerting me. How many lunches had we had at that very restaurant while she held on to that information? How many times had she listened to my worries about my husband's distance and opted for silence? "No, we haven't gotten closer," I replied curtly. "In fact, I barely know her. Just by sight, at some company events." The conversation continued. Superficially, but something had been irrevocably broken. That day, I lost trust not only in my husband, but also in my best friend. The feeling of isolation that was already growing inside me reached suffocating dimensions. 2 weeks later, we went to my father-in-law Robert Sr.'s birthday party. He was a respected figure in the region and the Anais and patriarch of a traditional family that had always welcomed me, at least on the surface. The event took place at the family estate in Connecticut, with the traditional BBQ by the pool that Martha, my mother-in-law, organized with such pride. To my surprise and indignation, Ashley was there. "Part of the team," Charles explained casually, as if it were absolutely normal to bring his assistant to a family event on a Sunday. I watched her circulate effortlessly among the guests, wearing a light dress that highlighted her youth, helping herself to the margaritas I myself had prepared following the traditional family recipe. Throughout the party, I noticed the exchanged glances between them, the knowing smiles, the way he always seemed to know exactly where she was in the extensive garden. And then, something even more disturbing. I noticed whispers and laughter among the relatives when I walked by, poorly disguised looks of pity from my sister-in-law, consoling pats on my shoulder from Charles's uncles without apparent explanation. They knew. All of them knew. The public humiliation, the one so many women of my generation were conditioned to fear above all else, was becoming my reality. I was the cheated wife everyone gossiped about behind my back while smiling politely to my face. The fool who continued making margaritas and serving them with a smile, while her husband showed off his mistress in front of everyone. "Helen, dear, are you all right? You look tired," Martha asked with false concern, while her eyes searched the garden for her son. "I'm fine, Martha, just a little preoccupied with work." How ironic. The only professional concern I had at that moment was whether I could continue my career with the same strength after the approaching emotional hurricane. "You work too much, my dear. Charles always says so. Maybe you should take a vacation. Relax a bit." "A vacation?" I couldn't contain a bitter laugh. "That's a great idea. Maybe I will. Alone." She didn't get the hint, or pretended not to. She just smiled, patted my arm with maternal condescension, and went to check if everyone was well served with meat. That afternoon at the estate was one of the longest of my life. I smiled so much my face hurt. I made small talk with people, who, I'm sure, were eagerly waiting to discuss my misfortune as soon as I turned my back. I served food, drank moderately, took photos. I played the role of the perfect wife one last time, like an accomplished actress in her final performance. Charles and I drove home in silence. He, probably guilty about his audacity in bringing his mistress so close to me. I, processing the public humiliation and calculating my next steps. 2 days later at home, while Charles was showering, his corporate email was left open on the computer we shared. I had never been one to invade his privacy. Ironic, considering the cameras now monitoring our beach house. But at that moment, I didn't hesitate. And there it was. An email exchange with a travel agency confirming a reservation for 2 at an exclusive inn in Nantucket. The date? Exactly the weekend of our 15th wedding anniversary. The worst part? Nantucket was the place we always dreamed of visiting together but kept postponing due to lack of time. I read the reservation details with almost scientific detachment. Master suite with a view of the historic harbor. Romantic package including breakfast in bed and a couple's massage. Special decoration with rose petals and champagne. All paid for with the corporate card, of course. The calculated cruelty of that gesture finally broke the emotional dam I had built. Not just cheating on me, not just humiliating me publicly, but stealing a dream that was ours and turning it into the backdrop for his extramarital affair. It was too much. That night, I cried for the first time since discovering everything. I cried for hours on end, silently, locked in the bathroom so he wouldn't notice. I cried for everything we had built that was now falling apart. I cried for the naivety of believing in a love that was apparently one-sided. I cried for the lost years, for the future plans that would never materialize, for the family I imagined we'd have in our old age. When I came out of the bathroom hours later, my face was swollen, but my resolve was clear. I needed to act. No longer passively observing the demolition of my marriage, but taking the reins of the situation. I needed to understand exactly what was happening, how far the betrayal went, and prepare myself properly for what was to come. I decided to pay a surprise visit to Charles's office, something I rarely did, respecting his professional space. I dressed meticulously that morning. I chose an elegant but discreet dress, flawless makeup, the perfume he once said was his favorite, not out of vanity or the ridiculous hope of winning him back, but to enter that environment with dignity, head held high. I arrived unannounced, telling the receptionist I wanted to surprise Charles. She smiled knowingly. Little did she know the surprise would be mine. I went up to the executive floor, where his office was located. What I saw upon arrival was revealing, not because of scandal, but because of its naturalness. Charles and Ashley were in the conference room with the door open, leaning over some documents. Nothing explicitly romantic or compromising. What struck me was the dynamic between them. The way they moved in sync around the space, how they seemed to predict each other's movements, how they shared their own language made of half-words and subtle gestures. It wasn't the behavior of a recent or purely physical affair. It was the intimacy developed over time, the complicity of an established relationship. That hit me like a punch. I wasn't witnessing just a passing fling, but a consolidated parallel relationship. Even more disturbing was noticing how the other employees interacted with the two of them. The averted gazes when they entered a room together. The knowing smiles when they shared an inside joke. The naturalness with which everyone accepted something that clearly went beyond the professional. Everyone knew. The entire office knew. They probably gossiped during coffee breaks, speculated over lunches, felt sorry for the architect wife who didn't notice anything. I was the last to know about something that was already practically public knowledge. Helen? Charles's voice, surprised to see me standing in the hallway, brought me back to reality. What are you doing here? I was in the area, decided to stop by and see if you wanted to grab lunch. My voice came out firm, controlled, as if presenting a project to difficult clients. Oh, what a shame. I have a meeting scheduled now with... He hesitated, looking at Ashley, who remained a few steps behind him with a neutral expression. With Ashley, I imagine. I smiled politely at her. How are you, Ashley? Charles always speaks very highly of your work. She blushed slightly. At least she had the decency to feel uncomfortable. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. It's a pleasure to finally meet you formally. Mrs. Miller. As if we were strangers. As if she didn't intimately know my home, my bed, my husband. As if she hadn't tried on my clothes when I wasn't around, as the cameras had shown. The pleasure is mine. I maintained the perfectly polite smile. I won't interrupt your meeting. Charles, I'll see you at home later. I left before my facade of calm crumbled. Alone in the elevator, I took several deep breaths. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control, crying in the hallways like the cheated wife from melodramatic movies. On the way home, I mentally organized what I had confirmed. Everyone knew about the affair, including employees, friends, and family. Their relationship was stable and comfortable, not a mere passing whim. And most importantly, I had been turned into a secondary character in my own life, the inconvenient wife who would eventually be discarded. Upon arriving home, instead of succumbing to despair, I called 3 people, my accountant, to understand exactly what my independent financial situation was, a discreet IT technician I knew from a previous project, to help me secure access to all necessary data before Charles could delete it, and finally, the best divorce lawyer in the city. I want to understand exactly what my rights are, I explained to the lawyer during our first consultation, presenting her with the bank statements, property documents, and evidence of the affair I had already collected. Miss Evans looked at me with a mixture of admiration and compassion. Mrs. Miller, I rarely see clients so prepared at their first consultation. Most arrive here emotionally devastated and without any plan. I've had time to process the initial shock, I replied simply. Now I need to act. She meticulously examined every document I presented. The cameras, were they installed without his consent? On a property that's registered solely in my name, yes. It was true. I discovered that the beach house, surprisingly, was registered only under my name. A gift from Charles years ago when his company was starting to prosper. At the time, I saw the gesture as romantic. Now I suspected it was just a way to protect assets in case his business failed. That might slightly complicate the use of that specific evidence, but we have plenty of material here besides that. The corporate card statements, for example, are particularly useful considering you don't have a formal separation of assets. I left that office with a clear plan of action and a feeling I hadn't experienced in months. Control. Not control over Charles or his actions. I apparently never had that. But control over my own destiny. In the following weeks, I continued my normal routine. I worked on my architectural projects, had dinner with Charles when he didn't have work commitments, even attended another family event, my mother-in-law's birthday, at a waterfront restaurant the family had frequented for generations. During that lunch, I noticed my sister-in-law, Beatrice, trying to pull me aside for a private conversation several times. She had always been the most sensible one in the family, the only one who didn't blindly idolize Charles as the successful prodigal son. "Helen, I need to tell you something," she began, when we finally had a moment alone near the restrooms. "About Charles and Ashley?" I cut straight to the point, tired of beating around the bush. Her eyes widened. "You know?" "Of course I know, B. Everyone knows, apparently. I'm just figuring out the best time to act." She seemed genuinely relieved. "Thank God. I couldn't stand seeing you being deceived anymore. I tried to bring it up a few times, but Mom always stopped me, saying it was a problem between you two, that we shouldn't interfere. Your mother always preferred to ignore anything unpleasant." I couldn't contain the acidity in my voice. "Remember when your father had that problem with the secretary 20 years ago? She did the exact same thing, pretended nothing was happening." Beatrice looked down. "It's different, Helen. Back then, women like Mom didn't have many options. They were financially, socially dependent, and they chose to condemn other women to the same silent humiliation, for convenience." My voice came out harsher than I intended. "Sorry, B. I'm not blaming you. In fact, I appreciate you trying to warn me." She squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do now?" "You'll see. Soon." We returned to the table as if nothing had happened. Martha raised her glass for a toast to her own health and longevity. Charles beside me squeezed my thigh under the table as if we were a normal, functional couple. I raised my glass too and smiled. I was tired of this life of appearances, tired of fake smiles, superficial conversations, carrying the weight of shame for something that wasn't my fault. But mostly, I was tired of being passive. With only 2 weeks left until our wedding anniversary, I decided it was time to finalize my plan. The evidence was collected and organized. My financial situation was secure. I discovered my own earnings as an architect were more substantial than I realized when accumulated over the years. The lawyer was ready to act as soon as I gave the signal. Only one last element was missing. The right moment. I could confront him privately, of course. It would be the most sensible, the most mature thing to do. But something inside me demanded more. After months of veiled public humiliation, I felt I deserved a reckoning to match. Not out of petty revenge, but for poetic justice. I started planning a surprise for our 15th anniversary. I sent invitations to close friends and family, announcing a special dinner at the beach house to celebrate our crystal anniversary. I deliberately included people I knew were aware of the affair: Patricia, my in-laws, Charles's colleagues. A dinner at the beach house? That specific weekend? Charles questioned when I mentioned the plans, clearly perturbed at having to cancel his romantic getaway with Ashley to Nantucket. "It's our 15th anniversary, Charles. I think it deserves a special celebration, don't you?" I kept my voice sweet, as if genuinely excited. He hesitated, probably calculating which scenario would make him look worse: canceling a wedding anniversary celebration or a secret trip with his mistress. "Of course you're right. 15 years is an important milestone," He forced a smile, likely thinking it would just be another night of pretending before he proceeded with his plans to leave me. In the days leading up to the event, I prepared every detail meticulously. I hired a catering service to serve the pao, seafood stew I learned to make from Charles's grandmother, his favorite dish for special occasions. I personally selected the wine, the same one he and Ashley had drunk on their first recorded visit to the house. I set the table with the Czech crystal glasses I had bought months earlier, when I still believed I had a marriage worth celebrating. On the day of the dinner, I arrived early at the beach house to supervise the preparations. The cameras were still functioning perfectly, but now with a different purpose. I discreetly set up a projector in the dining room, connected to my laptop. Guests started arriving around 7 in the evening. Charles appeared punctually, carrying a bouquet of roses and a rehearsed smile. "Happy anniversary, dear." He kissed me on the cheek, as guests applauded the romantic gesture. "Happy anniversary, Charles." I smiled, accepting the flowers. They would be the last I received from him. The dinner proceeded with apparent normality. Light conversation, reminiscing about shared moments, toast to the perfect couple we were in society's eyes. Charles, initially tense, gradually relaxed as he realized it would likely be just another night of appearances. Between the main course and dessert, I stood up with my glass in hand. Everyone fell silent, expecting the traditional speech of gratitude from the devoted wife. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight on this very special occasion." My voice sounded clear, firm. 15 years is enough time to truly know a person, don't you think? Some murmurs of agreement. Charles smiled, still comfortable in his chair at the head of the table. "I've prepared something special for all of us. A video with memorable moments from these 15 years. I pressed the remote control. The lights dimmed automatically, and the projector turned on, illuminating the white wall I had purposefully left bare. The first images were innocent. Photos of us on trips, happy moments, building the beach house. Charles visibly relaxed, probably thinking I had prepared a standard romantic retrospective. Then, without warning, the images changed. On the improvised screen, Charles and Ashley entered the house, embracing. The date stamp in the corner left no doubt about the recording's recency. They kissed in the living room, opened champagne, went upstairs together to the bedroom. The silence in the dining room was absolute. All eyes shifted between the projected images and Charles, who had frozen in his chair, his face transforming into a mask of horror and humiliation. "It's not exactly what it looks like," he began, his voice strangled. "Isn't it?" I maintained my calm, almost curious tone. "Then explain it to me, Charles. Explain to all of us what it means to bring your assistant to our house. Use our bed, drink our wine. Explain about the trip to Nantucket you planned for this weekend. Yes, the one to the place we always dreamed of visiting together." His eyes widened as he realized how much I knew. On the screen, carefully edited scenes continued to play. Nothing explicitly sexual, I wouldn't stoop to vulgarity, but sufficiently compromising. Charles showing Ashley the house. The two of them toasting to new beginnings. Her trying on my clothes in the closet, laughing. Him putting our wedding photo in the drawer. "Helen, can we talk about this privately?" His voice pleaded as he tried to stand up. "Why privately, Charles? Everyone here already knew." I looked directly at Patricia, who lowered her eyes, unable to meet my gaze. "My best friend knew. Your parents knew." Martha covered her face with her hands. "Your colleagues, our mutual friends. Everyone knew and chose to participate in the charade. So why not discuss it openly now?" A heavy silence fell over the room. On the screen, the images had stopped, frozen on a frame where Charles kissed Ashley on the deck, with the Hampton sunset in the background, a scene that could have been romantic if it weren't so painfully treacherous. But don't worry, I didn't invite you here just for this embarrassing spectacle. I walked over to a folder I had left aside on the sideboard. "Charles, these are the divorce papers, already prepared by my lawyer, who, by the way, is present among our guests. Ms. Evans, thank you for coming." The lawyer, seated discreetly in a corner, nodded professionally. "The agreement is fair. You keep your company and your personal investments. I get this house, which I recently discovered is registered solely in my name. A gift from you years ago, remember? How ironic. The nest you built for your betrayal ended up being my only consolation. Charles seemed to shrink physically in his chair. His face alternated between extreme pallor and an intense flush of shame. As for the communal assets, the division is detailed in the documents. I consulted experts, checked bank statements, analyzed investments. Don't worry, I don't want anything more than what I'm entitled to. 15 years of exclusive dedication deserve some compensation, don't you think? I placed the papers in front of him, along with a pen. You can sign now or later with your lawyer. But know that the evidence I have goes far beyond these recordings. If you choose litigation, I am prepared. Charles picked up the pen with trembling hands. His usual arrogance completely crumbled before the public exposure. And as for the guests, I turned to the room, where everyone remained paralyzed by the scene they were witnessing. Thank you all for coming. The caterer will continue serving. Feel free to stay and enjoy the seafood stew. It's a family recipe, after all. But I, unfortunately, need to leave. 15 years of lies are enough for a lifetime, don't you think? I picked up my purse and walked calmly to the door. Before leaving, I turned one last time. Oh, and Patricia. No need to call tomorrow, feigning surprise. Your number's been blocked for weeks. The sea breeze greeted me as I stepped out onto the deck. The night was perfectly starry, as if the universe were celebrating my liberation. I took a deep breath, feeling the salt air fill my lungs. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel everything. The pain, the anger, the humiliation, the grief, for a future that would never happen. Then, I let it all go with the next exhale. I went down to the beach and walked barefoot on the sand, still warm from the day. The waves broke gently, in a cadence that always calmed me. In the distance, I could see the lights of the house, imagining the chaotic scene I had left behind. I felt no regret, only a strange emptiness that, I suspected, would gradually be filled by new possibilities. 15 years is too long to waste on someone who didn't value me, but also long enough to learn valuable lessons about strength, resilience, and above all, self-love. On that starry night, with the sound of the sea as my only company, I promised myself that I would never again allow my worth to be determined by another person. The beach house that witnessed the betrayal would now be the setting for my new beginning. I would renovate every room, change every piece of furniture, transform every painful memory into a new space that reflected who I was now. A 42-year-old woman starting the second act of her life, wiser, stronger, and completely free. In the Apuyon, months that followed, many people asked if exposing Charles that way hadn't been excessive, if it wouldn't have been more dignified to handle everything discreetly. Usually, these were the same people who, for months, participated in the conspiracy of silence that kept me in ignorance, as if the discretion they lacked when gossiping about my misfortune behind my back was now demanded of me at the moment of my liberation. Charles tried to win me back, of course. When the dust settled, and he realized what he had lost, the flowers came, the vows of repentance, the promises to change. Too late. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Some betrayals are so deep, they permanently alter how we see the person. I no longer recognized him, or perhaps, for the first time, I saw him clearly. Ashley disappeared from the company a few days after the incident. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was transferred to a branch office in another state. A confidentiality agreement signed, generous severance package, the price of silence and convenience. Charles was always good at solving problems with money. Patricia tried to contact me several times. Letters, emails. She even showed up at my office once. I didn't see her. Someday, perhaps, when the wound isn't so raw, I might be able to hear her explanations. But for now, I prefer the company of people who proved their loyalty when it mattered. Interestingly, my relationship with Beatrice, my former sister-in-law, strengthened. She was the only one who tried to warn me, the only one who showed genuine concern for my well-being above family appearances. We have dinner together regularly now. Two women who chose honesty in a world that often rewards pretense. As for me, I rediscovered myself little by little. I resumed professional projects I had postponed. I traveled alone to places I always wanted to see. I redecorated the beach house, transforming it into a space exclusively mine. I learned to appreciate my own company, the silence that once frightened me, the freedom of unnegotiated decisions. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were nights of overwhelming loneliness, moments of doubt, days when I questioned every decision made. Grieving a 15-year marriage is not a simple or linear process, but every morning, waking up in the house that now reflects only my tastes and preferences, I confirm that I chose the right path. When people ask if I still believe in love, I honestly answer yes. Not in idealized romantic love, not in the fairy tale, happily ever after. I believe in love as a daily choice, as mutual respect, as a genuine partnership. And I believe, above all, that it's better to be alone than in bad company. That old saying our grandmothers repeated, and which we only fully understand when we experience its meaning. Today, at 43, I see myself as a woman under construction. Not as a victim of betrayal, not as someone's ex-wife, but as the protagonist of my own still developing story. I don't know what the future holds. New loves, perhaps, or a satisfying single life. I only know that, whatever the path, it will be chosen by me, with my eyes wide open and a heart cautious, but not hardened. If there's one lesson I take from these 15 years, and their painful conclusion, it's that our capacity to start over is infinitely greater than we imagine. That even from the ashes of the deepest humiliation can be born a stronger, wiser, more authentic version of ourselves. Maybe you reading this are going through something similar. Maybe you're questioning signs, intuitions, distrusting explanations that don't make sense. Maybe you fear discovering the truth because you're afraid of what you'll do with it. To you, I say only this: the truth, however painful, always sets you free. And on the other side of the pain, there is a world of possibilities you can't even glimpse while living in the shadow of lies. The beach house in the Hamptons is still there, its windows facing the sea, a silent witness to endings and beginnings. The waves continue to break on the shore, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding before them. And I am still here, rediscovering each day the bittersweet taste of freedom won through pain. 15 years of marriage are gone, but life, my life, unique and unrepeatable, continues to unfold before me, with all its possibilities intact.